I want to talk about right now with Brendan O'Neill, who will be with me in a second, is a really, really shocking one. This is an Islamist killer winning a £240,000 battle over, guess what, his human rights. He took a prison officer hostage. He demanded the release of Abu Qatada, that absolute scumbag who wants to destroy our country. He's won a £240,000 battle over taxpayer-funded compensation and legal costs. Guess who has agreed to pay the £7,500? Yep, the mastermind himself, the Justice Secretary David Lammy, has said that £7,500 in compensation will be paid and a £234,000 legal bill will be paid in regard to Fuad Owale, who's a convicted double murderer, and the judge has ruled his treatment in jail breached his human rights. Why did it breach his human rights? Because he was transferred to a special separation unit for the country's most dangerous prisoners after he and another inmate ambushed the prison officer, threatened to kill him unless Britain released Abu Qatada. So he was segregated for threatening to kill the prison officer who he took hostage. Okay, so he was segregated for that. He claimed the segregation designed to prevent him harming officers and radicalising other inmates. Sounds pretty sensible to me. Although, also, mate, you've killed two people. You're a double murderer. You shouldn't have any rights apart from the very, very basic ones. He said it breached his right to a private life under Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. He'd suffered severe depression as a result of being denied contact with other inmates. This is where we are. This is where we are. Now, I'm not sure about the absolute wisdom of withdrawing from the European Convention on Human Rights. I think it's probably a good idea, but at the same time, I don't think it'll fix everything, because there'll be so many judges like this judge who will say, I'm only applying the law. This is the way things are. The High Court ruling in his favour. The judge said the degree of interference with the claimant's private life, which had resulted from his removal from association, had been of some significance and duration. Well, should you actually have a right to any form of private life, actually, when you're a prisoner, when you've killed other two people? What about their human rights? What about the human rights of the prison officer who was taken hostage? It's bizarre. It's utterly, utterly bizarre, and says so much about our society and where we are right now in 2026. Brendan O'Neill is the chief political writer at Spiked Online. Brendan, it's good to talk to you. Happy New Year. Am I going mad here?
It's insane. I mean, sometimes you read a news story and you can't quite believe that it's real, and this is one of those examples. I think it shows so many problems with the current system. Firstly, it definitely raises questions about the European Convention on Human Rights. The fact that a double killer like this, who became a radical Islamist who threatened to kill a prison officer, the fact that he can use the ECHR to make his case for a private life is preposterous. And the vast majority of people in this country know that it's preposterous. You know, the more important point here, I think, is that radical Islamists should not be allowed to associate in prison. That is really, really important. We know from various studies that there are some prisons where Islamists were ganging together and basically taking over and threatening other prisoners to convert.
And also radicalising other prisoners. I mean, I worked in the Ministry of Justice and for 6 months as a special advisor. One of the really, really big issues we dealt with was in Streatham. There was a knifeman in Streatham who'd been radicalised in prison. So often what happens is you go in as what they sometimes call an ODC, an ordinary decent criminal. You go in for something awful like armed robbery and you get radicalised into this Islamism. Also, people who aren't necessarily members of the Islamic faith, are not necessarily Muslims before they go in, but are told convert, or will have something to say about that. And some of these gangs not just radicalise people, but bully them into, with threat of their life, to convert to Islam and then try to convert them and radicalise them that way. It's a massive, massive problem. And many of the gangs, of course, running the prisons as well. I have direct experience of that.
It's a huge problem. It's incredible. And I just have this very firm belief that if you're a radical Islamist in prison, you should not be allowed to associate with other radical Islamists. I agree with you. Prisoners should have rights. They should have the basic rights, the right to food, the right to a night's sleep, and maybe after a period of punishment they should have some rights of association as well, of course, but that should not include the right of people like this double killer to associate with other Islamists who hate this country, who hate everyone who represents this country, which in their case would include prison officers. They should not be allowed to associate and spread their poisonous, toxic ideology inside our prisons. That is fundamental rule that we should uphold. And I think the ECHR, if this doesn't raise questions questions about it in the minds of politicians, nothing will.
Again, we're just coming back again and again and again to the European Convention on Human Rights. It was just yesterday that the European Court of Human Rights has looked into the case of Shamima Begum. She hates this country. Quite a number of people think that actually maybe she should be brought here and put on trial. There's no guarantee that she would necessarily be convicted, of course, although the evidence is very, very strong. She was an Islamic State bride. There are many others who've been Islamic State brides who've been brought back, of course, to this country and told, you know, bad decision, don't do it again. But she hasn't been brought back, and I think that speaks volumes. Spoke to a documentary maker a couple of days ago who had interviewed her a number of times, but unsurprisingly, the ECHR investigating whether Britain had breached the ECHR by stripping her of her citizenship. I mean, if you cannot strip someone of their citizenship, especially when they have the citizenship of another country, in her case Bangladesh, what is the point of sovereign power? What is the point of nationality? What is the point of government, one might argue, if you have the ECHR who says, well, you can make whatever decision you want, but we'll do something differently. And of course, our human rights lawyers, Lord Hermer, Keir Starmer, the ones who run this country, will say, oh, well, the ECHR says it. We must absolutely do it. We couldn't possibly not obey what the ECHR says. Well, the point of international law is, yeah, you should generally obey it. But we've seen, as has happened in this country and others, David Cameron ignoring it when prisoners were told to get the vote, for example. He just said, look, we're just not doing that. We'll deal with the consequences. And there were no consequences.
You know, this is the real problem with the ECHR and the way it's enacted at the moment. It is a threat to our sovereignty. It's a threat to our right to behave as an independent democratic nation and for our elected politicians to make choices that they think are in the national interest. Because so often all of that is challenged by activist lawyers, activist judges, and criminals who exploit the ECHR to get one over on the government. You know, if there is this extra layer of power that prevents elected politicians from doing what they want to do, if what they want to do is within the realm of basic decency and law as we traditionally understood it, that's a real problem. And if you look at someone like Shamima Begum, for example, my personal view is that she committed treason when she went to join ISIS, when she threw her lot in with the sworn enemies of the United Kingdom and the Western world more broadly, a movement that is so savage, so vicious, it kills apostates, it kills Kurds, it kills homosexuals, it oppresses women. When you sign up to a movement like that, as she did, then you have lost your right to claim to be a Briton. And for the ECHR to possibly come in and even undercut an important decision like that, that would be a real travesty.
I'll talk more about a couple of other issues in a minute, but lots of people responding to what you have said, and we will talk about that more in a second. I just want to play a voice note now from Peter.
This compensation is an absolute disgrace. You know, what is he depressed? Well, we're all depressed with what this government's doing with us. Can we have 240 grand as well? What they need to do is stop all the legal aid for these people. Just stop paying legal fees, or if any of these solicitors offer their legal services, they should be made to pay it themselves. They shouldn't be taking more tax money off people in this jumped up sham of a compensation.
I kind of don't blame the lawyers, actually, Peter and myself, because they're doing a job that they're paid to do. I blame the system. I blame the laws that are there in the first place, and a government that is so inept that I can't change them. And I'm talking about successive governments here. I'm not just talking about Labour, although we'll talk quite a lot about them later on in the programme. Very interesting article in the Times today about how Labour does business and the problems that they have. I wonder if we could talk just a little bit about Nigel Farage, Brendan, because he has said that Reform will go double or quits on local elections with a £5 million spending blitz. Tell us a little bit about that. And this is against the backdrop of the not in any way shocking news that the one in, one out scheme has meant that we have taken more people than we have given to France.
I mean, Nigel Farage could just clean up at the moment because there are so many things going wrong in Keir Starmer's Britain, and prime amongst them is the border crisis. The fact we have these broken, porous borders that people are just crossing almost every day, except when the weather is bad, and then it kind of stops for a little bit. But, you know, the one in, one out scheme is a classic example of things that are going wrong, because we have taken in more people from France than we've sent to France, 2 people more, I think, in total. But even more to the point, I think we've sent back 193 people to France as a part of this scheme. During this government, 64,000 people have crossed our borders. It's like, you know, rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. It's making no impact whatsoever on what
we're told it will discourage them. I wonder if there's anybody there on continental Europe sitting in Calais thinking, Do you know what? I might, there's a tiny possibility, there's about a minuscule possibility that I'll be sent back to France. I can always come back if I want to, as we know has happened already. People who were deported to France and then came back anyway. I mean, I just wonder if a single person has been put off by the one in, one out strategy.
Absolutely not. It's inconceivable. You know, these are people who are willing to take pretty severe risks anyway to get to the UK, and they're not going to be put off by this scheme that is clearly just a sham. It's just not working. And, you know, the problem is that we have no serious deterrence to stop this breaking of our borders almost every single day of the year. You know, we put the people up in hotels, we give them bed and board, we feed them, you know, most of them end up staying in the UK anyway. It seems impossible for our government to deport them for some reason. You know, this is instead of a deterrent, we're holding up a welcome sign. Yeah. We're saying, come to Britain, we'll let you in, we'll treat you well, you'll get better treatment than the homeless people in Britain itself will be sleeping in the cold over Christmas. That's what we're saying to them. Yeah. They know that's what we're saying, and that's why they keep coming. That's the truth of it.
Just a quick word before you go, Brendan, about Zoran Mandami. He is now the mayor of New York. Already there are issues and problems about what he has said or indeed not saying about anti-Semitism in the city. I'm sure you've been following that, as I have, Brendan. How worried are you by this major politician in control of one of the world's big cities, most important cities?
I'm really worried, actually. And I think, you know, the fact that, for example, he refused to condemn the slogan "Globalise the Intifada," which our own police here in the UK, in Manchester and London, are now cracking down on because they recognise it's an incitement to violence against Jews. And now we have a mayor of New York City, you know, the second largest home to Jews outside of Israel, who refuses to condemn even phrases like that. It's incredibly worrying, and it demonstrates that through the so-called Palestine issue, a lot of old-fashioned anti-Semitism has come to the surface, and he is not the politician to clamp down on it.
Thank you, Brendan. Brendan O'Neill there, the chief political writer at Spiked Online. Thank you to